The office was unusually quiet that Friday afternoon, the kind of silence that made every sound feel louder, from the soft hum of the air conditioner to the ticking clock above the conference room door, and Emily Carter felt at the moment she stepped out of the elevator, sensing that the day carried a weight she could not yet name, as most of the staff had already left early for the weekend, leaving behind half-empty desks and glowing computer screens, and she told herself she would finish her reports quickly and go home, unaware that one short conversation would pull her far from that plan, because when she reached Daniel Harper's office, her boss looked different, not careless or unprofessional, but thoughtful in a way that suggested he had been sitting with his thoughts for too long, his jacket folded neatly over a chair, sleeves rolled up, eyes fixed on the city skyline beyond the window, and when he turned to face her, his voice was calm but carried an edge of hesitation that immediately caught her attention, as he thanked her for staying late and praised her work in a direct way that felt sincere, not routine, then paused, as if choosing his next words carefully, before telling her that the company retreat scheduled for the weekend had been cancelled at the last moment, yet the place was still booked, a small cabin far from the noise, meant for planning and reflection, and he admitted that he had been overwhelmed lately, caught between responsibility and exhaustion. Needing space to think clearly about the future of the firm, and without rushing, without pressure, he suggested they spend the weekend there to review plans and prepare for the upcoming quarter, explaining that he trusted her judgment more than anyone else's, which made Emily's heart beat faster even as she kept her face neutral, because Daniel had always been fair and respectful, never personal beyond what work required, and yet the idea felt different, heavier, as if it carried meaning beyond spreadsheets and timelines, and she hesitated for only a second before nodding, telling herself it was just another assignment, though her thoughts raced ahead, wondering why he had chosen her and not another manager, noticing the way he avoided holding her gaze for too long, as if aware of how close the suggestion came to crossing an invisible line, and when he gave her the address and details in a brief email, she left the office with her bag over her shoulder, walking through the nearly empty parking garage with a strange mix of confidence and uncertainty, replaying the conversation again and again, questioning her own reactions, reminding herself of professionalism while feeling a quiet pull she could not explain, and as she drove home through familiar streets, she thought about her life outside work, about evenings spent alone, ambitions she had buried under routine, and the comfort she found in structure, all while a single thought lingered in her mind, growing stronger with every mile, that this weekend, meant to be simple and practical, might reveal something she was not ready to face, and as she finally reached her apartment, phone buzzing softly with Daniel's message wishing her a safe drive the next day, Emily sat in her car for a long moment before going inside, aware that she stood at the edge of something unplanned, something quiet but powerful, and she wondered, not for the first time, how a single suggestion could feel like the beginning of a story she had never meant to enter. The cabin was even more serene than Emily had imagined, tucked away in northern Vermont, surrounded by towering pines and a lake that mirrored the overcast sky, and when she arrived, Daniel was already there on the porch, holding a steaming cup of coffee, his posture relaxed in a way she had never seen at the office, and the sight of him smiling warmly made her chest tighten, a mix of comfort and something she couldn't yet name, as she stepped inside, taking in the wooden interior, the soft rugs, and the scent of pine that made the world feel distant, removed from deadlines, emails, and meetings, and their first evening passed with a quiet ease, unpacking their bags, preparing dinner together in the small kitchen, talking about schedules and client updates, yet each conversation seemed lighter, punctuated by small laughs and shared glances that lingered just a second too long to be casual, and after dinner, they sat by the large window overlooking the lake, the rain beginning softly against the glass, Daniel talking in a way he never did at the office, admitting his exhaustion, his loneliness, the divorce that had left him more work than companionship, and Emily listened, surprised by the openness, sensing layers of vulnerability beneath the composed exterior she always saw at work, and in response, she shared fragments of her own life, dreams she had paused, relationships that ended quietly, ambitions she kept to herself, each revelation forging a subtle connection between them, the room dimly lit, reflections of candlelight flickering against their faces, making the world outside disappear, and although there was no physical contact beyond polite distance, the energy between them was palpable, charged with an unspoken understanding that something had shifted, that the quiet and the isolation of the cabin had created space for truth and emotion that daily life never allowed, and Emily found herself lying awake later that night, listening to the gentle rhythm of rain on the roof, replaying their conversations, noticing how she observed him, the way he paused, the way his voice softened when he spoke honestly, the fleeting vulnerability in his eyes, and she wondered if he felt the same pull, the same tension that had nothing to do with work, and everything to do with human connection, and she realized the weekend had already started to alter her perspective, not just about Daniel but about herself, about her capacity to feel, to hope, and to trust that moments of beauty could exist even in unexpected places, and as sleep finally claimed her, she understood that the quiet place was doing exactly what it promised, stripping away pretense, creating honesty, and allowing emotions to surface, leaving both of them to confront the truth of what they were beginning to feel, and Emily could not help but feel that this weekend, simple in appearance, had the potential to quietly change everything in ways neither of them could yet define. The next morning, the air was crisp, and the cabin was alive with the soft sounds of nature, birds calling, leaves rustling, and the faint scent of wet earth from last night's rain, and Emily found herself walking beside Daniel under a shared umbrella along the lake's edge, their conversation flowing easily, no longer limited to work, laughter spilling naturally as they pointed out birds, commented on the gentle ripples of the water, and shared memories of their childhood summers, feeling a lightness neither had expected, and as they returned, soaked slightly but smiling, Daniel suggested they organize some of the weekend's planning notes at the wooden table, where sunlight now poured in through the windows, illuminating scattered papers and pens, and while sorting through schedules and client information, he stopped mid-sentence, looking at her with a softness she had not seen before, and in a low, careful voice, he said her name, almost testing it, as if speaking it aloud might reveal more than he could otherwise admit. Then he confessed, gently, that he admired her, not just for her professional abilities, but for her honesty, her dedication, and the way she carried herself, and Emily felt a rush of warmth and vulnerability, a mix of pride and fear, because while his words were sincere and heartfelt, they existed in a space that was complicated by their roles and responsibilities, and she reminded him softly that boundaries mattered, that their connection could not erase the rules outside the cabin, yet she did not stop listening, because hearing the truth, even in its quietest form, was compelling, and as the afternoon light shifted to a golden glow, they both fell into thoughtful silence, glancing at each other occasionally, aware of the weight in the unspoken, the tension between what could be felt and what could not be acted upon, and when the rain finally ceased and they stepped onto the porch, the world outside washed clean, Emily realized that the quietness of the cabin had made them more honest, more aware of each other's presence, and that this honesty did not need a dramatic gesture or a sudden confession to be meaningful. It simply existed in the way Daniel looked at her when he thought she wasn't noticing, in the pauses that held more than words, in the shared moments that felt intimate yet respectful, and as they prepared for the final night in the cabin, packing away some of their notes while keeping a few personal items within reach, both understood that the weekend had shifted something invisible, a new awareness of feelings that could not be ignored, a recognition of emotional depth that went beyond professional admiration, and Emily went to bed that night feeling the complexity of longing, respect, and restraint all at once, realizing that what was left unsaid carried its own weight, a quiet but undeniable truth that the weekend had revealed, and that this truth would travel with them back into the city, lingering in glances, conversations, and quiet moments, changing their perception of each other without breaking the boundaries of what was possible, and she slept knowing that some emotions do not need expression to be real. Sometimes, they only need acknowledgement, a quiet acceptance of the depth of connection, and the recognition that life can shift gently, irrevocably. In the calm of a weekend spent in a quiet place back in the city, the office felt louder, busier, and more chaotic than ever, with ringing phones, constant emails, and the shuffle of coworkers moving between desks. Yet Emily moved through it with a new sense of calm, a quiet strength she had discovered over the weekend, and Daniel, too, returned to his composed, professional demeanor, leading meetings, reviewing reports, and managing staff with the same precision he always had, but beneath the surface, both carried the unspoken truth of what had passed between them at the cabin, a truth that did not require words to exist, felt in the subtle glances across the office, the small pauses in conversation, the shared understanding that some experiences change people quietly yet profoundly, and when Emily received an unexpected job offer from a company in Seattle, a promotion she had worked years to earn, she was torn between excitement for her future and the weight of leaving behind a connection that had become unexpectedly important, and when she told Daniel, he smiled, congratulating her warmly, his pride evident but tempered with a quiet sadness, because he knew that timing and circumstance would keep them from exploring what they felt in Vermont, and on her last day, as she packed her things and prepared to leave, he handed her a small envelope, simple, unassuming, yet heavy with emotion, containing a note that thanked her for reminding him of life beyond work, for bringing a human, emotional perspective into his structured existence, and as Emily read the note, she felt a mixture of gratitude, longing, and closure, realizing that some stories do not end with dramatic gestures or promises, that sometimes the depth of connection lies in restraint, honesty, and mutual respect, and as she walked out of the building one final time, the city bustling around her, she understood that the weekend in that quiet cabin had given her more than reflection, it had given her a sense of emotional clarity, a memory of trust, understanding, and subtle intimacy that would stay with her long after she began her new chapter in Seattle, and she smiled softly, feeling both the ache of what could not be and the hope of what awaited, knowing that love, respect, and meaningful connection can exist even without immediate resolution, and that sometimes the quietest moments leave the loudest impact, shaping hearts and lives in ways that are gentle yet unforgettable, and she carried that understanding with her, a quiet, beautiful truth born from a weekend away, knowing that the human heart is capable of feeling deeply, growing, and remembering even when life moves on, and that some stories, while unfulfilled in the traditional sense, are complete in the honesty and depth they leave behind, and as Emily stepped into her future, she held the memory of that lake, that cabin, that quiet understanding between her and Daniel, a testament to the subtle power of connection, emotion, and the beauty of restraint, a story not of what was acted upon, but of what was felt, respected, and cherished, a story that would linger in her mind and heart forever, shaping her approach to life, love, and the delicate balance between desire and responsibility, leaving her with both heartache and hope, and an unshakable sense that some weekends, some moments, and some connections are enough to change a person forever without ever needing to be claimed.